Fängt ja gut an. Mit ein bisschen Mugge.
ganze Zeit schon warten.
Nächstes Mal. Höchstens.
Alles kannst du mal so umschreiben.
Ich glaube, da müsste höchstens eine Death Metal Band auftreten oder so.
Thank you very much.
Definitiv eine Death Metal Band müsste auftreten. Ey, dann sind sie alle da plötzlich.
Thank you, David. I'm looking forward to a little bit later when David and his band are going to return and have another performance for us. So today we're going to talk about how sound can be a narrative device that helps support both immersion and the progression of story. In a game like
Geräusche
World of
sind ein
Warcraft,
Phänomen, wenn man sie
one place
zusammenbringt.
that sound really shines is in how it supports the storytelling. Good acting and casting, for example,
Geräusche sind ein
can bring a
Phänomen.
character to life and help you invest in their story. Who was here yesterday for the Voices of War panel? That's such a good cast on Battle for Azeroth. The music. Music often provides emotional guideposts that help you understand what you should be feeling. It can also be an anchor for a character or story arc.
Yeah.
And that's something we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Sound design is a little more
Sound
stealthy.
design.
It provides an ambiance that brings you into the environment. It's subtle. It's a subtle craft. It's not always exactly what you see, but it's often filling in the gaps, the unseen, the abstract and intangible. For more than a decade, I've had the good fortune to be able to work with some amazing sound artists and producers that have made all of these things a reality in World of Warcraft. It's my privilege now to actually introduce you to some of the team that worked on Battle for Azeroth. So please join me in welcoming Glenn Stafford, principal composer. Glenn is also the founder of the Blizzard audio department and one of the nicest people that you'll ever meet. Michael Hill, sound designer. And Torin Shaman Main. Michael's actually much more than that. He is our team modular synth fanatic. He has also taken the mantle from me as the person who has the most alts. As of Legion, at least, he has at least one of every class at max level and currently is working on leveling his personal army up to 120 in Battle for Azeroth, so good luck with that.
Thanks.
Dave Roven, sound supervisor for Battle for Azeroth. Dave has been working in audio for more than 25 years. 20 of that has actually been in game audio. 20 years of game audio. He started at Blizzard 8 years ago and has worked on a number of our titles, including Mist of Pandaria and Legion. So, with Dave, before we actually dive too deep, you took on the mantle of sound supervisor during Battle for Azeroth. Why don't you start us off by talking about your approach to sound design and what that actually looks like for World of Warcraft going forward?
Okay. So yeah, I took over about a year ago, and I can't tell you how humbling it is to work on this game. It's a legend in game sound, and I've been in game sound a long time. So I'm just really happy to be on the team at all. I want to talk a little bit about my philosophy of approaching sound for games, and it's really based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is to make the player feel as powerful as possible. The way we do that, one way we do that in WoW, is to make your sounds and your spells and skills louder than anybody else's. So if you are a gnome arms warrior, like I am, and you are standing next to another gnome arms warrior and you both fire off Colossus Smash, yours will overpower theirs. And then, because you are the most important person in Azeroth at that moment. The second pillar is to help the player play the game, and that's just give clues on what's going on in the world so that you can make smart decisions. So for example, if you're wandering around in Drustvar and you get too close to a creature they will fire off a aggro sound, and you will know you have pulled that creature, and then you can make a decision whether to fight or run. The third pillar is the more interesting pillar, which is immersion. What immersion is it's a form of storytelling. It can be as simple as a really beautiful ambience. So if you've been to the Broken Shore, my predecessor, Mike Johnson, did an amazing ambience. If you just sit there for a while and listen to what the Broken Shore sounds like, it sets the stage for what you're going to encounter in that zone. It's really beautiful. Another example would be flying around. When you fly around, what do you hear? It's worth taking a listen. Just to experience where you are as you transition from zone to zone, how those things go back and forth. At its core, immersion is about emotional engagement. And one game that I think, in a very simple and elegant way, does a great job of drawing the player in. And that game is Space Invaders from the early 80s, late 70s, I'm not sure. And it has one technique, and it really works. And it basically, they play a 4-note melody, a boom, 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 and just speed it up slowly over the course of the level. And it's very effective, very simple, and I think really good sound design. Like Space Invaders, we're kind of an old game, not quite that old. But we have some technical challenges, and people like Michael spend a decent amount of their day just trying to figure out how to accomplish even sometimes simple tasks. I come from a technical background. I have a computer science background, and that is my strength. So I feel like it's my job to improve the quality of the tools that these guys have. One thing that came in during the Legion cycle is something called field of vision filtering. The idea is to help the player focus on what's dangerous and what's in front of them. And so what we do is we take everything that not only is behind you, but also on screen, but off to the sides, and we lower their volume a little bit extra, and we also roll off some of the treble and roll off some of the bass, and that helps you focus on what's dangerous and what's important. So this brings us to Drustvar. Drustvar represented a great opportunity for sound to tell the story. I would say horror, it's sort of classic horror zone, and sound, they go hand in hand. Some of the best sound for movies, some of the best sound for games is in the horror context. So we were really excited about being able to do that. And let's take a little fly through of Drustvar, remind you of where this is, and then talk to the people who actually did the work to make Drustvar come alive.
Schön.
Ja?
Gratis Stil.
Ja.
Ihr könnt alle gehen jetzt.
Ja, schöne Elias, das lieber Schwander.
Heilige Scheiße.
Kann ich nichts zu sagen.
Ja, halt mal versucht mit meinem Dämonien alleine zu machen.
So, I want to go back to you as sound supervisor.
War keine gute
Stepping
Idee.
into this role is not an easy task, not on a 14-year-old game. I think Dave has done an excellent job, like his predecessors, picking up this mantle and bringing his own unique skill set and knowledge to bear. And what that's meant is he's looking out for the future of what WoW will become, putting his knowledge towards that, creating something that will live beyond all of us. And with that, he's also leading a team of 6 sound designers. And we actually have one of them with us today, Michael. I'd like to hand this off to you and have you talk about the work that you did with sound and how you use that to bring an environment to life, like in Drustvar.
Absolutely. So I thought I'd kind of run through the tools and the techniques that we use kind of across the board in World of Warcraft to set the stage sonically and create an immersive experience. And I wanted to start with ambience. Quick question, how many of you have had a chance to do the BlizzCon, the WoW Classic demo at BlizzCon? Handful of you, awesome. Cool, so the WoW Classic experience is kind of our building block. It's the fundamentals that we've been expanding on ever since it launched. So we'll start there. Classic ambient audio loop in Elwyn Forest is a good example here of how ambience is covered at WoW's launch. You hear some of those birds. Very safe, very familiar, very comforting, very inviting place for a low-level Alliance character who's maybe not as hardened as, say, an Orc in Durotar. So what we do with these loops is we have a couple of minutes of a seamless looping file. It's a stereo sound. It has all the things you would expect to hear in this location. In the case of the forest, you have birds and kind of very natural foresty sounds. Desert's going to be deserty. If you're playing the classic demo, listen for what the crossroads sounds like. Listen for Westfall's plains. So we use these everywhere. This is like our foundation for how we do ambience across the board. But it does have some limitations. And in 2004, we're kind of locked into those. But our computers are better now. We can do more cool stuff. So one of the things that, one of the limitations here is it's a loop. And you might spend 3 hours questing in a zone, but this is a 2-minute long loop. So if a bird is making a particular pattern of chirps, whether you consciously realize it or not, that's a pattern. And your brain is picking up on that pattern and it's hearing, but I'm hearing the exact same bird over and over. Every 2 minutes, exact same bird. After 3 hours, on some level, you know that this is not a real forest. This is a video game forest. So it's fine for 2004, but we've grown a lot. So one of the layers that we've been adding over the years, we call them flavor kits. A lot of different games have different terminology for this. The idea with a flavor kit is instead of baking something like a bird sound into that fixed loop, I create this randomized container. I have a randomized timer I can set. So I'm going to grab a bird sample. I'm going to play it for you maybe every 10 to 30 seconds. I can randomize the pitch. So maybe one bird sample is a little higher than another. So all these different bird chirps, they're all a little different. They're a little varied. It's a little bit more natural. It's subtle stuff. We can randomize volume. We can also randomize the 3D position that we're using. So when that bird plays, maybe it's a little in front of you to your left, or maybe it's behind you to your right. The filtering that Dave mentioned, where things that are behind you are filtered out a little bit, they're a little less high frequency, that's also applying to things like a bird. And these are actual 3D sounds that appear in the game space. So as you're moving around, you hear a bird start to make a sound, and you kind of rotate your character, rotate your camera, you can tell the bird is in that tree right there. It's not just kind of a omnipresent birds around you, not attached to the zone. So subtle stuff, but it does make a big difference over the course of that 3 hours of questing in a zone. So this is really great for us. We're able to put a lot of interesting personality into a zone. We can make layer after layer after layer here. I have a couple of clips of individual flavor kits in Drustvar. And this is kind of the early zone of Drustvar where maybe you don't know just how bad this zone is going to get. So it's kind of familiar, some sounds you might know. Some owls. There's a lot of crows. There's a lot of Nerf guns. Some tree creaks and stuff. So those sounds, there's a couple of examples that of maybe a dozen layers and maybe a dozen randomizations of those things. So it just helps sell the idea that you're actually hearing real organic sounds and not just those static loops. And those loops are also, they kind of lock us in. I can't do a crazy, ostentatious, like over-the-top sound and bake it into a loop. If I do, you're going to notice that loop really quickly. It's going to be fatiguing. hypothetically, it might make you want to turn your sound down or off. We know that. Yeah, no one here would do that, of course, but hypothetically, it could happen. So flavor kits let us do stuff like I could have a crazy sound on a 10-minute timer, and you might have to stick around for a long time to actually hear that sound go off. And it's not going to be as fatiguing as it is kind of interesting. Like something that I haven't heard before just happened there. That's awesome. So really useful. So the next kind of tool we have, I'm just going to learn the minutia here of what I do. I'm excited about this stuff. So we also want to have sounds that are actually rooted in the environment as much as possible. So here's actually those flavor kits layered over the loop for context. So at first listen, this might not be immediately apparent that it's different from that Elwyn Forest example, but yeah, spend 3 hours there. It starts to kind of, I think you can tell the difference. Again, subtlety is this field's focus, so hopefully people notice. So yeah, the positional sounds that we actually bake into the environment. This is something like, say, a waterfall. We have our ambient bed. You see a waterfall in the distance. As you approach it, the sound of the waterfall rises up. It kind of dominates the soundscape. It moves out of the way as you move past the waterfall. Really simple, really basic example, but it helps to add kind of a punctuation and reinforce the fact that you're in a real space. Azeroth is real. We're really there, and we're moving across the zone, and kind of hearing these different sounds rise up and fall off as we move. So every time we look at a zone, we want to find places where we can create new layers and make these little positional sounds. In the case of Drustvar, we have it's kind of a spooky, ethereal, creepy sound. And this is tied to the effigies that are hanging in these trees. So when you set foot in Drustvar, it looks like a normal forest until you see the weird little bird skull and sinew hanging from rope by a branch. And the question should be, who did that? Why is that here? Spoiler alert, it's witches. There's a lot of witches here. They're up to no good. So having this kind of creepy ethereal layer emanating from these things is just going to be punctuation. So you move through the zone, and you have these little weird sounds placed all through the trees. Maybe they grab your attention. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's so subtle that you don't really notice it. But on some level, you might have noticed it. So this is something where I'm trying to find it. Every zone we're in, there's places where we want these cool little layers. I have a clip of those in context, and I realize subtlety in kind of a noisy hall might be a little tricky. So see if you can hear those layers on top of our ambient bed. It's one off to our side. So we can visualize where these are with our game tools. So every one of those pink circles is actually the root of one of these game objects. And so every one of those is a spherical emitter with those creepy little sounds coming out of it. So subtle, but oh, thank you. Emitters got applause.
Applause break.
Fantastic. So that kind of gives us our tools for ambience and making the environment and wanting you to explore this zone and get rewarded for it. But this is World of Warcraft. You have to have a reason to go someplace, and the reason is you got to go kill stuff. So that brings us to some of the creatures that we have in Drustvar. Of course, witches are sort of the iconic thing here. So, getting back to that WoW Classic example, we do creature coverage with aggros, like Dave mentioned. I pulled something, I heard a voice. We have attacks and wounds, we have a death sound. I killed it, congratulations. So kind of reinforces gameplay mechanics. It helps us sell the personality of the character, of the creature. And that's super useful. So 2004 WoW, we have lots of iconic sounds, the Murloc sound, like we know these things that etched into our brains. And so every time we do a new creature, we want to make sure that it has a really rich personality and that it's just in-depth and cool. But we also have been starting to add extra layers because we want it to sound like a witch in Drustvar, for example, is actually living in the woods, doing things up to no good. So I like the idea that they just love how evil they are. They're just cackling. They're just having a blast with their rituals, their evil cauldrons, and hanging those horrible effigies. So the idea is we put idle sounds on the witch with a big emitter, big enough that it's outside of the aggro range. So as you're wandering through the woods, you might actually hear a witch from over there cackling to herself, snorting, just having a blast. And you get close enough, then she aggroes, and her personality changes. Suddenly she's gone from enjoying her work to she's been interrupted by a hero. She needs to go kill you so she can get back to her cauldron or whatever. So I have a clip here of the idol and then one of the aggros. So just over the top, kind of cartoony, kind of threatening. I think she's got a lot of fun personality there. So again, this is something where we want to put these kinds of idols on every creature we can and really make it feel like they live in these spaces. And it also fleshes out the ambience. So it's just almost an extra layer to say, yeah, these are real creatures that really live here, whether it's a witch or a tiger or whatever. So one more layer to this. Drustvar has this evil, dark history with the Drust spirits that have cursed this zone, and they have their own sort of type of magical energy. The art team made these amazing visuals so that you can really differentiate. Like, if it's Drust magic, it's its own form of witchcraft. It's different from things we've already seen in previous expansions. It's not Void, it's not Shadow. So that's a good excuse for us to make cool sounds. Blizzard has a senior sound designer named Ronos Peacock who created this witchcraft sound that's all the spell components that are really impactful and mean and screechy and just perfect for something a witch would be doing. I have a clip of what that looks like. Sounds like.
Boink.
So anytime we have an opportunity to do this kind of stuff, it's awesome. The team is always looking for those places to make interesting visuals, and we latch on to that at every opportunity. So all this stuff is kind of our bread and butter tools. This gives us coverage. So once we have all these things, we have sounds you would expect to hear as you play through the game. But when we're able to, we also want to find the places where maybe we can do something a little more involved, like maybe there's a gameplay mechanic that we can reinforce. Or maybe there's a narrative arc that we can help sell. So whatever interesting stuff is going on in the game, we want to really help reinforce and drive that. So in the case of Drustvar, this arc starts you off in this creepy, haunted, something's not quite right kind of forest. What is it hiding? So you progress through this zone, and you end up in an area like Crimson Woods, where there's no longer any mystery. It's witches. There's an army of them. They've raised an even larger army of wicked beasts. They're trying to kill you. And it's very, very bad. So from an audio perspective, I want to be able to support that. One of the ways I can do that is with those groups we talked about, flavor kits, and kind of swapping in and out what things we put in there to really reinforce this story. So the graveyard here is one of the early places you go in Drustvar that sort of ratchets up the intensity a little bit. So like on the spooky meter, Drustvar spooky, Drustvar graveyard is the next tier, right? So we start removing some of the flavor kits that you're familiar with, and start putting in some that are hard to target. Like, what is that sound? What made that? Where's that coming from? So definitely stuff you would not hear in Elwyn Forest at all. So as we progress to the later zone, we swap out all the familiar stuff. All the safe, comfortable things you're used to hearing in a forest are gone, and now it's just creepy, weird, disturbing stuff. So I have a couple of clips of some of the weirder flavor kits in isolation, and you can hear them over this graveyard loop, and then again over the Crimson Woods. Something weird out there. What is that animal? The witch capitals, of course, they're baked into the environment here as well.
Man, perfect.
So here's the context for that over the graveyard. There's some frogs in there, there's some familiar things. There's also that weird sound. What is that? Here's Crimson Woods, much weirder. So the same kind of layers there, but weird sounds as well. So the
hab die
idea is
nicht
you can kind
einmal
of foreshadow
gezogen.
where you're going. You start to hear the weird stuff.
Ich hab
early
alles
on in the
gezogen,
zone,
aber
and
nur
you get
sie
a
nicht.
payoff later
Weißt du,
when
ist
you
schon der
full on
Azeroth.
from one end to the other. It's I don't know, I
Das
use the
hab
word
ich
subtle
jetzt
too
in
many
den
times. It's subtle.
Naja.
But it's one of those things that on some level helps reinforce the story, reinforce the narrative arc. And that's something we're always trying to find opportunities to do.
Excellent. So, Michael, you've kind of talked us through how sound can be used to enhance narrative flow, as well as immerse you in an environment. I want to take a step back and look at music and talk about how music fits into those same ideas. So, Glenn, something that we often hear is people asking about the creative process. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about how your first exposure to Drustvar and how that inspired your work with the musical themes?
Absolutely, yeah, thank you, Jay. And so just to be clear, the graveyard was the safe place?
It's notch 2 on the speaker.
So yeah, music has similar roles as sound design. It varies sometimes, but sometimes it's just setting an ambient tone.
Ohne Sound gibt's nicht.
Sometimes it's a little bit more emotional, but a lot of times it's sort of wallpaper background effect. Less frequently there's an event, a musical event, and probably even less frequently than that there's some music emanating from somewhere in the world, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But the first place that inspired me was, well, yeah, just walking around Drustvar, seeing all the awesome artwork. It starts scary and it gets more scary from there. So it would be tempting to start in a very dark horror kind of place and go even maybe darker from there. But it might not leave us much room to go to progress. So one of the first things we come across, or I came across, was this Abby Lewis character that is a child, and something's off here, something's not. I won't give away the story, but it gave me the idea that this should be maybe more classic horror music from last century, where we had more melody, more focus on a musical aspect, harmonic strangeness and orchestral strangeness. We wanted to set up a sense of history, of connection with this character, setting up for this whole zone that just gets darker and darker and scarier from there. So that gives us a good starting point to get progressively darker. Anyway, I think you heard a little bit of this in the opening clip, but we got a little clip of the Abby Lewis theme, if you will. It's not really necessarily her theme, but it's got some high piano, some tremolo strings that give it a little bit edginess, and I think there's a toy piano in there somewhere. Let's go ahead with the clip.
Super.
It's got that kind of haunting high choir line as well. So that just, it gives you some tension, some darkness. Maybe the harmony is a little bit twisted, not quite right. But it's something it's something familiar and childlike. So moving on further into the zone where I came across, one of the things I came across that inspired me was this Fall Haven. Just, I don't know, something about the artwork in the area. And one of the things for this piece, we're going to show another clip. I was drawing on different orchestral techniques. I already mentioned the tremolo strings and things like that. So for the orchestra, sometimes you can do, like, give them a starting note. They start at a low note and they do what they want, do what they will, like in between, and then you give them an ending note. So going from low to high in this case, some of the players were assigned actual notes and they end up there at predetermined times, and the other ones just kind of float. So it gives you this weird strangeness that coalesces into a single note or chord. And let's run that.
Kommt mir gerade vor, als würde ich eine Mittelerde
It
hören.
goes on for a while, but yeah, that
Jetzt
was
mal
a big-
ehrlich.
well, here's a
Das
big
klingt doch ein bisschen.
Hat schon viele Mitarbeiter hat der Blizzard.
Ja, wie
This
viel
big
denn?
ending chord goes on for a
4700.
while too.
Ja, leck mich am Arsch.
Eine Abteilung?
Gesamt Blizzard. Ganz gesamt Blizzard.
Oder
4000.
sind ein paar Leute?
Was?
Ein paar.
Ja, die Aktie ist um $20 pro Aktie abgestürzt.
Tja, was haben wir erwartet?
Dass man bei Diablo
Den
Jubelstellen macht?
Diablo-Fail
Right, finally.
Ja, das war
hätte
echt-
ich auch ausmalen können. Wenn sie nicht so weit gedacht haben, dann
Ja, wenn das Diablo-Team nicht so weit gedacht hat, ja.
So that's getting darker. So we have
Der Rest von Blizzard
gone
kann ja nichts
from-
dafür.
progressed from the childlike theme to a darker theme, and setting more tension, drawing on more techniques, but also trying to keep it in a familiar vein, obviously in a Warcraft vein. Another area that spoke to me, not sure why, it's called Glenbrook Wood. And the interesting thing I thought about this was that I introduced a melody here that gets quoted later in other ways, to where here it's an orchestral statement, a little bit quieter, and later on it'll be repeated again in a minute here. But we have a clip.
Was haben die hier gearbeitet? Battle Chess, oh. Was ist das? Rollenspiel, Rollenspiel, wo? Aha. Hey, immer noch Brustbau.
ist ja alles schön und gut so. Aber ich finde, in einem MMO wirkt das nicht so. Selbst wenn du die Umgebung alles hast, du hast trotzdem 50 Millionen Spieler, die um dich herumruckeln. Nicht den ganzen
Nö, so
Atmosphäre.
viel Roppeln da nicht rum.
So if you can kind of
Ich
try to
kann
keep that in your head a little bit, there's their half-step motion, which is, yeah, single notes, including the black notes on the piano. So it's da, 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 da. So there's that motion is sort of the defining element of that piece, or one of the defining elements, and that's the part that gets quoted later on as we approach, to me, what is the culmination of this zone, the scariest, weirdest stuff going on. Crimson Forest is pretty weird too, but yeah. And that is Waycrest Manor. So that's the zone in this piece. So yeah, keeping those half steps in your head. We're going to play another clip here that has music when you're on the outside of Waycrest Manor. And there it is.
Ja, das ist noch so. Das sieht doch echt voll aus.
Was?
Das Haunted Menschen, ey.
Ja.
Ja. Sitzt doch auf dem Hügelchen,
Ja, komisch.
gehst da vor ein Tor.
Ja, ja, Blizzard.
It's a bit more
Wo ihr
muted.
überall
Ja,
immer,
auf der sprechenden Statue.
Also it's a different instrument.
wo die immer überall sind, oder weiß ich nicht.
Pipe organ, right?
Darf ich sie nicht anstellen?
Who would
Ja,
know
das Gleiche.
a pipe organ in a haunted mansion?
Ich hab gerade gesagt, Haunted Menschen.
And as we enter the mansion, having been drawn in by that distant sounding organ, which is kind of muted and coming from the mansion apparently, here's what we hear on the inside.
Ja. Und wenn du gleich reinkommst, dann sieht das gleich so aus. Tja.
Raus, meins.
Geil.
Ja.
Wann kommt Housing?
Was?
Wann kommt Housing?
Wahrscheinlich, wenn kurz vor dem letzten Teil.
Ja, ungefähr.
Nur so plötzlich vor.
Meine Güte, du brauchst einen Friseur.
So yeah, everything's all normal here.
Waycrest, man.
So, I do want to jump in.
Ja, Drospa war ja auch der erste Beat, der gleich gemacht
I think it's
hat.
important that we highlight what Waycrest Manor means for sound. This is the most advanced sound work that we've ever put into a dungeon for World of Warcraft. I think it's ultimately the result of a cross-discipline effort. We had design, art, engineering, and sound all working together around this very clear, very creepy vision. The first time we actually heard about the organ was from an encounter designer, Robert Nunes. He came down and he pitched this idea of
Ja,
a
doch,
musical
Warcraft
boss
kam ja
fight,
ganz kurz nach
just something
Warcraft
we
3
haven't
war.
actually had before. It was really cool,
Na,
really
Warcraft 3,
complicated.
das erste
And
kam,
things ended up shifting a little bit, but
Reign of Chaos
it was the
2002.
kickoff point for ultimately a lot of what we're talking about
Frozen
today.
Throne 2003,
It
2004
set up
sind ja
this
schon gleich
idea of
gestartet mit
introducing a theme and
World of
ideas
Warcraft.
from when you
Ja, sie
come
müssen
into
ja
a zone
parallel
to
gearbeitet
that point
haben
where
daran.
there's a dungeon capper in a very
Aber
sound
wenn du
specific
siehst mal die
way.
alten
And
Aufnahmen,
so we were excited by
welchen
that
Jahr die sind.
possibility. It was fun to watch as the organ actually kind of became a character itself. Glenn, I think why don't you talk a little bit about some of those initial conversations and how that gave you some direction in terms of the way you treated the
Zu
organ.
den unheimlichen Dungeons.
Sure. Yeah. So Robert Nunes proposed this idea of
Always.
this boss
Ja,
fight
diverse
with
andere Sounds.
involving the organ, but it was going to have these different pillars, which we kind of went a different direction than that. So the idea was that spells would be emitting from these pillars, and somehow there would be pipe organ shooting the spells out of the pillars, and the pipe organ was somehow involved, and there would be different chords coming out of each pillar. Ultimately, what we ended up with, I think, is even cooler. It's a little bit different, but it's even cooler than that because we got rid of the pillars, and the spells are actually coming from the pipe organ itself. So the organ is sort of more central. Lady Waycrest is playing the organ, and we have all these places where the pipes are sticking out of the walls in different places in the manor. And we wanted those to make sound as you approach them and things like that. So there was all these technical challenges, not only with the boss fight, but with the emitters and the normal background music that we normally play in zones. Because this was, for WoW anyway, being built in 2004, yeah, this was a new area for us to explore. So Michael, you were like super instrumental in getting all that stuff to happen from a technical standpoint and bringing together all the people that allowed that to happen. And I tried to support it musically and do my best to help with that. But I think you can tell us much better how we did that.
Sure. So this is a cool opportunity, like Jay mentioned. I'll throw a definition out there real quick.
Eine schöne Enzyklopädie,
Diegetic
wa?
audio, everyone knows that phrase. This is the idea that a sound that's diegetic is a sound that is in the world. So if you hit something with an axe and it makes a clank sound, that's diegetic. A bird, a roar, the sounds creatures make, environment, all that's diegetic
Sind echt
audio.
verrückt.
Non-diegetic is stuff like the music layer. It's like the tone
Brauchst du
setting.
sowas nicht? Kennst du dich damit aus mit dem
Literally
Programm?
that music playing in your
Ich habe
setting.
lieber Leute,
It's
die
just setting an
Tutorials machen,
emotional
die ich
tone.
ansehen kann und die auch
This dungeon lets
besser
us play
erklären
with that, and
können.
it kind of breaks
Wo
up this
muss der
boundary. So
Stahl?
normally in WoW, if you say
Ja?
you go to Stormwind,
Wo
and you
fängst
hear
du an,
the Symphony
Das
Orchestra,
erklärt dir
Ja,
keiner.
auf der ersten Seite.
there isn't like 120 NPCs hitting instruments around the corner, like playing that music in the world. It's just a cool emotional layer. So that's something that usually we kind of do this in a kind of a standard way.
3 Millionen Jahre lang ist
In
das
Wake Crest Manor,
Welt.
the pipe is a character.
So geil.
Wie viele Seiten verzeichnet sind dort, ey?
Was nicht sein, verzeichnet.
The opportunity to actually make that a character, make it diegetic, like put it in the world and have a presence. So it's something that we haven't done a lot before, and we would play around with it. So the first place where this kind of comes up is these areas in the dungeon where you have a pipe organ maybe on the wall or like a wall fixture where in the fiction downstairs Lady Waycrest, she's on her pipe organ, she's playing her evil music, she's using it to summon these threats to try to clear out the heroes. So if you get close enough to one of these emitters, she is playing her evil music, it summons in a witch, you fight the witch, if you kill the witch, it's like she's angry, she slams her hand on the keyboard and plays this discordant chord.
Das ist einfach anfangen zu singen, wenn es
This
tot
is kind
ist.
of a transition from the normal dungeon music. You'll hear it kind of go away, and instead the pipe organ is actually coming from a spot on the wall with an emitter, so you can kind of hear the positional element of this. And then when you finally kill the witch, you get that stinger at the end. Then we can bring back in the normal music. So I have a quick example of what that looks like with a little bit of cheating involved.
Währenddessen.
Ich will nicht Karasan rein.
Stimmt ein Game Master, der das spielt. So schnell tot.
So, kind of a simple idea, but kind of a fun payoff. So, definitely, there's some weird challenges here. One of the things we had to deal with was our emitters in WoW are pretty simple. The idea is that it's just in a spot relative to your character, and it plays a sound. It has no idea the concept of walls, of ceilings, floors. It just says, how far away is it? Play the sound.
Oh, man.
So Waycrest Manor has this really tightly, densely packed layout. So if I want an emitter in one room, and I don't want to hear it anywhere else, our tech doesn't really let us do that. So we had to latch on to the stuff that the encounter designer was using, Robert Nunes. The same logic that summons in that witch also allows these emitters to turn on or off. It's what triggers that stinger at the end. Once the emitter's shut off, the music comes back in. It's all based on the same encounter logic that is determining creature spawning, that kind of thing. So that was exciting for us to kind of, like, we don't generally get to do that, so it's kind of a cool thing. So one other example, this is kind of the whole dungeon's leading up to this fight with Lady Waycrest. And yeah, there's one more boss, but he doesn't have a musical instrument, so not quite as exciting. So the Lady Waycrest fight, you finally have cleared the first 3 bosses, you're making your way down to the basement. We hear a stinger that's kind of the main theme for this dungeon, the pipe organ, the choir. But then the music doesn't keep looping. It's silence down there. You eventually pull Lord Waycrest, he leaps across, he starts fighting you. Lady Waycrest is sitting at a pipe organ playing her keys, and she's using that pipe organ to pelt you with her Drustvar witch magic. So every so often she uses an ability called Discordant Cadenza, and this is kind of her showing off a little flourish of she really wants to kill you. She's going to pelt you with extra damage. So this is another positional sound coming from her pipe organ while she's sitting there playing it. It lets you know you're about to get hit with something a little heavier, a little harder damage. So here's a clip of that. So just the positional sounds coming from the pipe organ, and none of our normal kind of dungeon music. Once you finally kill her husband, she brings him back to life, you kill him again, back to life. He's undead, so he's kind of hard to kill, but eventually she gets fed up. She stops playing her pipe organ, she jumps over to where you are, and now she's no longer using that discordant cadenza ability. So we shut off her emitter and we bring up the dungeon music, and we're kind of back to our traditional dungeon encounter experience. And it's that final payoff. This is the last place where you hear the pipe organ playing sounds. Well, it's kind of an autopilot while she tries to kill you alongside her husband. So when you finish her off, the music shuts off, and that's it for the rest of the dungeon. It's kind of the final payoff for this entire arc, leading up to Waycrest, entering Waycrest, fighting her way through these witches, and finally finishing off the woman who's been playing this pipe organ the whole time. So kind of an exciting thing for us. So all of this is not the most advanced audio in terms of what the game industry is doing in general, but for this born in 2004 game engine, this is really cool for us. This is an exciting opportunity that convergence of level design making this incredible place, the encounter design with these cool musical ideas, music and video and sound effects, all these things coming together is awesome for us. Like Jay mentioned, this is really fun. It's cool to have this payoff. And we're looking for places anywhere in World of Warcraft as we move forward where we can do similar things. Not every dungeon is going to be built around a musical instrument, but there's other cool things we can do. We're going to try to find places where we can do this kind of stuff to reinforce gameplay, reinforce narrative arcs. So I'm very excited about this.
So, all this talk of Waycrest Manor, should we do it? Okay. So, I think they said don't. Well, if you're into secrets, I think it's worth noting here today that Lady Waycrest has offered tribute and is waiting for you to find a little musical surprise. So with that, I'm going to ask Dave, any closing thoughts?
Well, my strength as a sound designer has always been technical, and I feel like it's my duty to put better and better tools in the hands of sound designers like Michael, and keep an ear out. We have a new system coming online for when you are on your mount or on a taxi. We're trying to make those sounds a little bit more immersive. Another one of our senior sound designers, Sean Bernardo, had a great idea and went off and did this thing, and it should be rolling out, I don't know when, but relatively soon. Keep your ears out, and hopefully we can move this game forward, keep moving it forward.
So, thank you. The developing technology in WoW today, and to be honest, the depth of story that's being told both within the game and now more than ever across multiple forms of media really has us excited about the potential that's being unlocked, the things that are getting set up, the opportunity, being able to take advantage of these tools that we haven't necessarily in the past. Truly, we believe that this is actually just the beginning of what sound has to offer World of Warcraft. And I think with that, that brings us to the end of our talk part of this. I'd like to, as David and his band return to the stage, I'd like to take a moment to thank our panelists, Dave, Michael, Glenn.
Next.
Once David is finished with the music portion, you can find us back in the meet and greet section. We'd love for you to stop by and say hello. Also, I need to call out that we are just a small part of a much larger group of audio professionals at Blizzard that support this game that we all love. And from all of us, we want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening. So, thank you. So David, you good? All right. Well, one more time, like David and his band, to take us across the Great Sea to the mighty Troll Empire and the markets of Zuldazar. David, take us home.
Sometimes when you're out fighting, you just want to go shopping, and that's what this song's about. The Zuldazar Bazaar.
Der Arkenstein.
Ah. Yay! Oh.
Thank you. This is a song that I can't believe is about 10 years old. It's called Blood Sail from the original Taverns of Azeroth set.
Yeah!
And there's a little bit of a sing-along. You don't have to do it, but anybody go la la la? Okay, you're ready. Thank you so much. It's a joy to work for Blizzard and make music for this game. I just gotta say that. This is Susan Winsberg on the flute, Dove on the violin, Luann on the fiddle, Dan on the drums, Josh on the drums, G on the accordion, Matt on the bass. Thank you so much. Have a great con. Thanks.